Hello and welcome to Insight. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Gyanendra Pratap Singh. Mr. Singh is the Special Director General of Police, Law and Order. He is the Director of Vigilance and Anti-Corruption. He is also the Chief of the Anti-Rhino Poaching Task Force. A 1991 batch IPS officer of the Assam Meghalaya cadre, Mr. Singh has been an intrinsic part of Assam's journey that has traversed from conflict to peace. Come join us today as we discuss this transformation and the future of Assam. Mr. Singh, welcome to Insight. It is really a pleasure to have you with us today. I want to start by asking you, you've pretty much seen the entire evolution of the state from being a conflict-ridden state to now a state of relative peace. How was this achieved, considering that there were so many organizations, terrorist organizations that were functioning in the state, like NDFD, DHD, Ulfah? How did the security forces achieve this?
Most important thing in this journey from conflict to peace has been that it's the support of people of Assam that has brought this change. When we go back in time 30 years, 40 years back, we realized that at that time there was a ground support for certain groups which were perceived to be anti-national. But nowadays there is no ground support whatsoever for any violent activity in this state. So the greatest contributor to the peace coming to this state is the people of Assam. In addition to that, sustained policies of various governments over the period of time, where conflict has been taken to backstage, the agenda of peace, agenda of development, agenda of economic prosperities has been brought to the fore. So that is the primary reason that Assam has travelled from conflict to the relative peace that is there today. What we have to understand is that Assam is not a homogeneous unit as such. Assam consists of almost 100 plus ethnic groups. Almost 40-45 languages are spoken in this state. Assam has huge interstate boundaries, 7 states abut the borders of Assam. Then Assam has 2 international boundaries of Bangladesh and Bhutan. Then Assam has proximity to the international borders of China, Myanmar and Nepal. So that makes it a state which has possibilities for conflict. It is very active involvement of the people as stakeholders, the governments, administrative machinery, the business establishments, that together can not only bring peace but can sustain peace.
So, coming to, you said that people of Assam are largely responsible for this. What sort of strategies were used? Were they entirely operational, or were they psychological as well?
When we look at the conflict, first and foremost is that we have to understand that why the conflict is there. So if you look at Assam in that context, we would see that Assam has one section of people or multiple sections of people who have geographical or territorial aspirations. Then Assam has sections of people having their own linguistic aspirations. Then there is a large section of people, because of the religious composition of this state, with about 60% Hindu population, 34% Muslim population, about 3.5% Christian population. So people have differing religious aspirations. Then there are aspirations relating to identity. Now, when I talk in terms of identity, I mean that some people may want to say that they have Assamese identity, some Bengali identity, then Marwari identity, Bihari identity. So these identity groups are also very strong. And important aspect of these aspirations is that many a times aspirations of people in same geographical area are different, or different set of people have similar geographical aspiration. For example, there are areas in Lower Assam where Ulfah wanted sovereign Assam. Various Bodo militant groups like NDFP and others, they wanted at some stage sovereign Bodoland, or at a different point in time they wanted independent state of or separate state of Bodoland. So, this conflict is also there, same geographical area, different set of people asking or aspiring for different things. So, with these multifarious kinds of aspirations existing in a geographical area with different sets of people living in that area, the basic idea is that there has to be an aspiration amongst these people which overrides all these aspirations which divide the society. So, these are the fault lines. So, we have to find something which can actually be on the surface of all these things and cover these fault lines. And by covering, I do not mean that there should be a superficial cover. What I am saying is that these fault lines or these fissures have to be fixed so that the entire picture is such that there is no fault line. That is the final agenda. But till such time, or the journey for that we need to have this particular agenda. And that agenda people have realized, the stakeholders have realized, is the agenda of peace, agenda of economic development, and agenda of prosperity of the people who are inhabitants of this state. And that is what has happened in the last almost, I would say, a decade. The policies that have been taken up by the government of India and by the various governments of Assam, the peace, stability, economic prosperity has come to fore. And my idea about this entire thing is, having worked here, having seen people very intimately, having interacted with people very intimately, is that once they realize that peace and prosperity would bring economic development, and economic development would bring prosperity for them, and prosperity and economic development together would enhance their lifestyle or the standards of living, they become very important and strong stakeholders in the process of peace. And this is what has actually changed the dynamics from a conflict-ridden state to a state which is largely peaceful today.
Correct. I agree with you that development usually trumps all other ideas. But like you said, the 34% Islamic population that follows the Islamic religion. There's also an issue of illegal immigration as well as encroachment. Do you see a rise in radicalization, Islamic radicalization? Also, if you do, then what are the formats of de-radicalization?
It's a very interesting thing that with that kind of population percentage, and also with the proximity to international borders, and the kind of availability of social media, chat platforms, internet based interaction platforms, the likelihood of some fringe elements or some elements among these 34% people getting radicalized is very high. But then that is what the governments are all about. We have to actively interact with society, the leaders of various religious groups, and we have to ensure that the message goes to them that it is imperative in the interest of peace, imperative in the interest of economic development and prosperity, that radicalization, fundamentalism and the resultant violence should be kept at bay. So, one is outreach, government outreach, administration outreach towards various sections of people, including the religious minorities. Then second is providing them better quality of education, better quality of infrastructure, better quality of health facilities, so that they don't feel marginalized. And wherever we see seeds of such radicalization or fundamentalism taking place, there we have to take a decisive action. There we cannot be found to be thinking whether to take action or not to take action. Wherever we feel or we see that there is even a hint of radicalization which can lead to vociferous or anti-national or violent activity, we should come down with a very, very heavy hand with the might of the government against such radical elements.
I had also noticed, so had a lot of people outside Assam, that during some of the issues that had cropped up in Assam, like the encroachment issue, digitally, internationally, there was a movement that came up which attacked the moves that were made by the security forces and the government. What are the kind of initiatives that one can take to sort of curb this sort of digital attack on our steps that we take towards?
So, first and foremost, people have to understand that encroachment has to be removed, especially in reserve forests, in areas which are environmentally sensitive, unstable environment zones, which, as you are aware, Assam has whole lot of issues relating to environment. It is a bounden duty of the government to ensure that such encroachment does not take place. Now, coming to the removal of encroachment, I have been associated with it, so I am aware that all the lawful procedures have been followed. Despite that, because of opposition from the people who were living in those areas, while the encroachment was being removed, police had to, as last resort, use force, which has led to some consequences which we would not have liked to take place, but then the primary duty, primary mandate for us is to protect the environment. And in protection of environment, if we have to use some force, then we would not be found wanting. Of course, it would always be the lawful means. Now, coming to the use or misuse of digital platforms, one is that we have to, from our side, convey to the people what has actually happened, and that has been done by the government. In addition, there have been certain social media platforms, certain internet platforms where narrative has been spread that it was unlawful use of force. To that, I would say that in all cases we have investigated wherever such incidents have taken place. In fact, in a recent incident where such incident had taken place at Gorukhuti, the government of Assam immediately announced a judicial inquiry. One-man judicial commission has been announced, headed by a former judge of Guwahati High Court. So, all lawful means are being taken. We are addressing issues wherever they have cropped up, and we would ensure that the life, dignity and honor of the people of whichever section they belong to are respected, but the people also have to respect law. Everything has to be as per the established law of the land.
Correct. But if, let's say, a hashtag is trending internationally, so at this point it was trending in the Gulf, how do we tackle that, or we do not need to worry about it?
To some extent, vested interest groups would always create such hashtags, and they would sort of use internet platforms or social media platforms to their benefit. We have processes in place where we can take action. There are processes through which the government of India and the state investigating agencies, they can reach out to social media platforms. Most of them are, I would call them social media giants, and they have to be conveyed that this is not in our interest, in the national interest, especially because that affects the life and security of the people. What we have to understand is that when such a reaction or such a digital reaction takes place, many a times this instigates a lot of people to resort to violence. So, that actually has to be understood by the social media giants also, that whatever is written or whatever is being texted in that also has a propensity of causing violence in various parts of the country, especially at this moment I would restrict to Assam. So, we have been reaching out to them, and in many cases they have agreed to what we have conveyed, and in some cases we have also registered criminal cases against some people where misuse of internet platforms or social media platforms has taken place. Howsoever, this is, in a globally connected world, a very, very genuine issue, an issue of concern, and state, federal agencies and the state and federal governments, they have to work along with the internet service providers, social media giants and various other intermediaries to reach a solution for this. Instead of being at loggerheads, we should work towards, together, we should work towards peace.
Correct. Let me bring this conversation back to one of the organizations that we are still trying to bring into civil society, Ulfah. Ulfah was one of the better known terrorist organizations even outside of Assam. And it seems like we have not been able to reach out to Paresh Barua, if I'm correct in saying so. He also had battalions, very well organized. There was, I think, 108 battalion, there was a 28 battalion, which was disbanded. Who disbanded it? How was it disbanded? And has the peace process stalled because we have not been able to reach out to him?
So, Ulfah came into being on April 7th, 1979, where there was a meeting of some of the guys at Ranghar in Shivsagar district. Subsequently, Ulfah took birth, and initial stages it wasn't very violent, but towards mid 80s and 90s it started resorting to a lot of violent activities, killings, ambushes, extortions, and ultimately in 1990 Government of India launched army operations against Ulfah. So since then a lot of operations have been launched by Assam police, by armed forces, by central armed paramilitary forces working in Assam. And today Ulfah is restricted to a very small geographical area in Assam. The battalions that you talked about, they were there when Ulfah was at its peak in 90s and early 2000s. After that, most of the guys came overground. There were agreements with Government of Assam and Government of India. For a larger group of Ulfah, even today there is a talk going on, led by the former chairman Arvind Rajkua. I would not agree that government has not been able to reach out to Mr. Paresh Barua. In fact, after the present Chief Minister Dr. Hemant Biswa Sharma took over, he had made an appeal, and there have been some positive signals from Mr. Paresh Barua. In fact, it was for the first time recently on the 15th August that Ulfah did not give a call for Bandh. It was after many years, in fact for the first time in the 40 years of Ulfah's history, that no Bandh call was given, and people did come out in large numbers. Ulfah has given a unilateral call for suspension of operations, first for 3 months and now again it has been extended. So as of now there is a suspension of operations from Ulfah's side. Government has also reciprocated, and government has not really carried out any harsh operation against Ulfah during this period. I am hopeful that Ulfah leaders, especially Mr. Paresh Barua, being a true son of the soil, would heed to the call of the Chief Minister of Assam and start discussions on what exactly needs to be way ahead for a peaceful, prosperous and economically developed state. As I have seen from my interactions with various Ulfah senior leaders, and also at times telephonic interaction with Mr. Paresh Barua, he is also interested in peace in the state, and he is also interested in development. He may have his own reasons for going out of the mainstream, but I think it is time for him to come and be part of the development story of Assam. Assam is today poised at that point in history where next 10, 15, 20 years can be deciding factor for Assam's future. If we can use this with the Government of India's Look East policy and Act East policy, in Assam being the corridor or the gateway for the southeast, this is a time when we have to grab the opportunity. Mr. Paresh Barua also has to understand that he has to come out, and together with the Government of Assam, Government of India, I am sure that we can ensure that we have an absolutely economically developed state, as the government has, the Honorable Chief Minister has been saying that we want to have Assam amongst the top 5 economically developed states of the country, and if all of us put our best foot forward, it is easily doable.
Well, that seems like really positive news that, there's been an outreach and there's been good response. But having said that, I believe now there are more insurgents that have surrendered and are overground than not. Do you expect any sort of a sulfur sort of situation to crop up again?
I would try to make you understand what Assam insurgency and militancy has all been about. So, Assam traditionally has been divided into 4-5 geographical zones. One is the Brahmaputra Valley. So, within Brahmaputra Valley there has been Upper Assam, which is more towards the eastern side, Lower Assam, which is towards the western side, then there is Barak Valley. So, Brahmaputra Valley is on the northern and southern sides of river Brahmaputra, and Barak Valley is around Barak River, which originates in the Assam, Nagaland, Bareil ranges and then goes towards Bangladesh as Surma River. Now, in addition to these two major geographical zones, we have 3 hill districts: Karbi Anglong, West Karbi Anglong and Dima Hasao, which was earlier known as North Kachar Hills. So, Brahmaputra Valley, especially the upper Assam side, in 79, as you yourself mentioned, had the origin of Ulfah. Lower Assam, which is some of which is inhabited by people belonging to Bodo tribes, had Bodo militancy, which had Bodo Liberation Tigers, then Bodo Security Force, then came the National Democratic Front of Bodoland. Then because of these, some people from Bodo community going into the militancy, as a reaction to that, there was militancy which was from the Adivasis, which was from Bengalis, which was from the Gurkhas who live in that area, basically to defend them against the depredations caused by Bodo militants. Then the 3 hill districts that I talked about, they have their own militant groups, multiple militant groups of Karbi tribe, and then multiple militant groups of Dima Kacharis, Dimasa groups. So, Assam has had history of militancy all across. There have been some militant groups active in Barak Valley as well. Because of the outreach program of the government over the period of last 15 years, most of these militant groups have come out. In fact, in the last 5 and a half, 6 years, almost, I would not say almost, all Bodo groups which were involved in militant activities have come over ground. All Karbi groups have come over ground. All Dimasa groups have come over ground. Large part of Bru and Riang militant groups operating in the Barak Valley have come out. Almost, I would say 70-75% of Ulfah has come over ground. So, this is the time when we have to build up on this with active support of the major stakeholder, that is the people of Assam. The remaining part of Ulfah, now going by the name of Ulfah Independent, led by Mr. Paresh Barua, this also has to come out.
Let me move to another very important area that Assam has been facing, which is the drug menace. Congratulations are in order, because the kind of seizures that have been made in the last 6 months have been immense. But having said that, our borders are still fairly porous, and I believe that it's difficult to completely fence these borders because of thick forestation or whatever the reasons may be. What sort of initiatives have been taken to ensure that this is limited?
So, as far as drugs is concerned, we have to understand that the flow of drugs into India are mainly from 2 geographical areas. One is the FPAC area, where there is a major production center of heroin and from where the drugs come in, and the second is the tri-junction just south of China, that is Laos, Vietnam and Myanmar. This is the area of concern as far as Assam is concerned. So, this area initially used to produce heroin. Subsequently, in the last 10 years, we have seen that a lot of synthetic drugs are also being produced in that area. I would say that roughly about 80 to 85% of the drugs produced in this area go towards Western Europe and North America through Southeast Asia through ship lines and through various other land routes. But about 15 to 20% of the drugs produced in this area do come to India. Mainly these drugs are supposed to travel to the mainland India, but the corridor has essentially been through Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, Assam into the mainland India. Now, in the last 6 months, we have worked on 3 basic principles. One is that the demand has to be reduced. So, that is a social intervention where we have to ensure that the locals do not consume drugs. For that, various agencies of the government, including social welfare department and others, are working. Second is supply reduction. So, supply reduction is the part in which the enforcement agencies like police and other federal enforcement agencies have the major role to play. And third is that whatever is the resultant loss out of that, so that has to be reduced. So, the threat reduction, the third part of it, which is again setting up of rehab centers and this and that. So, demand and threat reduction from the drugs, that is being taken care of by multiple agencies. As far as supply is concerned, we are the major stakeholders, we are the principal agency now doing it. When the present government took over, led by Dr. Hemant Biswa Sharma, the first day there were few core areas that were identified for work during his tenure. One of them was drug. So, drug menace has to be reduced. That was his absolutely clear direction to the state police. We went cracking on that. Multiple seizures have been made across the state, especially we are looking at the entry points. So, the drugs coming from Myanmar do not reach us directly. It has to be routed either through Mizoram or Manipur or Nagaland. So, whatever are the checkpoints or the entry points into Assam from these 3 states, we are keeping a very close watch. And almost on a daily basis, we are seizing whole lot of drugs. We are using very stringent provisions of NDPS Act and PIT NDPS Act, so that we ensure that those people who have been arrested as peddlers are taken to task. Then the data indicates that street value worth about 275 crores of drugs has been seized during the last 6 months. Another thing that we have done is that we have, after taking approval from competent courts and following the due processes, we have started destroying the seized drugs, so that there is no recirculation by an act of omission or commission. So, that has also been done across the state. I don't think that we have really achieved 100% of the task, but a good beginning has been made. Police is all pepped up, and in the coming days and coming months, we want to ensure that the drug supply through Assam does not take place. That helps us in 2 ways. One is that local consumption gets reduced because the supply goes down, and more than that, we are interested in ensuring that drugs do not reach the mainland India. The drug trade has another corollary. That corollary is that lot of money generated out of drugs is historically known to finance anti-national or anti-India activity. So, if we can reduce this business, we would reduce the quantum of money which is available to various insurgent or militant groups which goes in for procurement of weapons. Then it also has a corrupting influence on various sections of society. So, that would also go down. So, that is why I think that this is one action which has to be continued. What we have seen that at the top, if we look into the backward and forward linkages of the drug trades, then backward linkages indicate that at some point there is a convergence of things like drug smuggling, then rhino poaching. That is not only rhino poaching in the sense that it is about the rhino horn, it is also about the wildlife smuggling of various kinds, then terrorism. So, all these things at some point are converging. The major players, when we look through the backward linkages, are those who are actually through different arms controlling all these criminal activities in the northeast. So action has to be taken. Very recently, we arrested one person who was a major player from Manipur, and we have intentions of continuing with this and going at full blast.
Well, best of luck, and it seems like we're really on the right track. But having said that, you mentioned that these drugs are routed from all these international areas. With Myanmar having a change in its power center, do you think that will have an effect? Because like you said earlier, that Assam is, the Northeast is the gateway to Southeast Asia for India. How do you think that is going to affect us? Also, if I may add, it is said that NSCN and Ulfah at times have functioned out of Myanmar. How does this affect terrorism in the state?
That's a very interesting scenario that presents itself before us in the aftermath of the recent changes or developments in Myanmar. Now, as far as the government structure in Myanmar is concerned, that is for the political leadership and the diplomatic corps to take call. How do they handle it? But as far as enforcement agencies are concerned, one of the primary concerns for us is that with Myanmar we have something called FMR, that is the free movement regime, which allows people from India and Myanmar to move up to 18 kilometers without any formal documentation. Now, some of these people are known to be carriers of drugs, so that is where the border guarding force, we have been in regular touch with them, and they have to proactively ensure that this FMR is not misused for the purpose of bringing in drugs or taking out as barter whatever comes from the drug trade. So that is essential. Then as far as these camps are concerned, now it is a fact that that's an area which has multiple activities going on, like camps of terrorist groups are there, then there are camps which are being used for the purpose of bringing in drugs, and as I said earlier, there is a convergence of various activities at some point. So I am sure that the government of India, through its diplomatic and soft power that it has or it exercises over Myanmar, would be looking into that. I would not like to go deeper into that because it is a domain which is definitely not mine. But what we have seen, that similarly in the past, territories of Bhutan and Bangladesh were being used by these non-state actors, and because of the diplomatic action taken by government of India, there were sustained operations against militant groups in Myanmar in 2003, in Bhutan in 1995, and in Bangladesh over the period of last 5-7 years, where almost all militant groups and their camps have been dismantled from Bhutan and Bangladesh. Myanmar has seen that in 2003 earlier. I am sure with the active engagement with the present power structure in Myanmar, we should continue to have that kind of positive engagement on this. Besides, Myanmar is the route that we also have to utilize for our look east and act east policy to yield results, economic results. So there has to be, I am sure there is very positive engagement with various stakeholders in Myanmar.
Correct. You said that Bangladesh and Myanmar, these areas had been used as places of operation for these groups. Now, we've seen a focus on the northwestern border, and now with the situation changing in Afghanistan, do you think the focus should also turn towards the northeastern border? Would there be any impact of the Taliban coming in Bangladesh? Would radicalization maybe take a new turn?
Well, I would not agree with you that there is a need for attention on northeast or northeastern international borders. There's always been attention here. It is just that perhaps in the public discourse, the northwestern borders have attracted more attention. The northeastern borders in the public discourse in mainland has attracted less attention, but the attention that Government of India gives to the international borders in northeast, I would say, is at par with what it is in the northwestern part. Now there is a fundamental difference between the kind of militancy or kind of thought processes of Islamic radicalization which exists in northwest and what exists in Bangladesh and Southeast Asia, that we have seen in the growth of international Islamic radical groups, or when we look at groups like Al-Qaeda or groups like ISIS in various formats. So ISIS also had some presence in Southeast Asia and Philippines. There were certain militant groups which tried to get a foothold in Bangladesh also. But Bangladesh has been about Jamaatul Mujahideen, JMB, and JMB's influence over India. And if I am not mistaken, in 2014-15, there were some activists of JMB who were arrested from Assam also. So that threat is always there. But I would not like to connect Taliban to the developments in Southeast Asia and Bangladesh. Bangladesh and radicalization process in Southeast Asia has to be looked at in a completely different silo as compared to what it is in Taliban or northwest part of Asia. Having said so, there is a need for keeping a very, very close watch on various developments that are taking place in Malaysia and Indonesia and Philippines, in Bangladesh, because they are intrinsically connected to the northeast of India. Not only northeast, it also has implications on other parts, because there are a lot of people who have come in from Bangladesh, and what we had seen in while there were investigations into the activities of JMB was that JMB modules were found to be active not only in northeast but also in Bengal, in Bihar, in Karnataka, in Maharashtra. So we have to be extremely careful, we have to be vigilant, we have to be very, very watchful, so that we don't allow these groups coming from Bangladesh. And also what is important is that these two streams of radical elements of Islam, one flowing in from southeast and from Bangladesh and the other flowing in from northwest, that is FPAC region, do not mix, and together they do not form a force which would be stronger than these two entities existing separately.
Correct. Well, Mr. Singh, what can I say? I think we are really, keeping an eye on the ball with officers like you at the forefront. But having said that, like you said, development is a major reason that you've seen a decline of insurgent groups and conflict. Tourism would play a huge part in it. So how safe do you think would tourists feel now coming into Assam? How safe should they feel? And what would you say should be the message that goes out to the rest of the country vis-a-vis Assam now?
Well, most of the people have heard about Assam only because of the conflict. But having stayed here for more than 3 decades, I would say that geographically it is one of the most beautiful areas. From wildlife perspective, both from flora and fauna perspective, I think that the richest biodiversity in the entire world exists in northeast India, Assam being central to it. Assam has 2 World Heritage Sites in Kaziranga National Park and Manas National Park, and Assam also has one-horned rhino. That again is another success story where one-horned rhino was almost on the verge of extinction, but because of sustained efforts by governments, especially the forest department, forest officials, we have now reached a place where there is a huge geographical area which has presence of one-horned rhino. I incidentally also had the anti-rhino poaching task force of the government. So we have been making extra effort so that there is no poaching. And as I said, that it is again connected to international crimes. Coming back to the tourism part, so it's a very, very rich biodiversity zone, and for people to come and experience it is once in a lifetime opportunity. They should definitely come. It's absolutely peaceful. I don't see any threat to any tourist in Assam at all. And as I said earlier, that the major stakeholders in the entire process of the peace are the people of Assam. And again, the stakeholders for the tourists to come in are the people of Assam. So I am sure that the people of Assam would welcome tourists from across the globe, across country. And with excellent road infrastructure, Assam again has 6 airports, functional airports. So the connectivity is also very good as far as Assam is concerned. So people should come, enjoy the natural beauty here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Singh, for joining us on Insight today, and I hope to have you again soon.
Thank you.
Assam is a state with 7 interstate boundaries and 2 international borders, and by virtue of its destiny, it is one of the most strategically located states in the country. Assam has seen its share of problems, but what is really clear by today's discussion is that we are witnessing the emergence of a new Assam.